michael-pmasters.com. And thank you.
Good evening, or morning, depending on your time zone. From the Pacific to the Atlantic to you worldwide. Get yourself a cup of Java and find a comfy, easy chair. And get ready for Gary and his guest on Night Dreams Talk Radio. After Dark.
And I am
now,
back.
Here's Gary.
And I am back. I'm sorry about that. I walked on top of myself. That's a brand new intro one of the stations sent me. Anyway, we're interviewing tonight Dr. Michael Masters, and we're talking about aliens, UFOs. We even touched on little people and Bigfoot. Michael, are you still there? Hopefully you're still there. I think he's getting himself a cup of Java. But anyway, Bigfoot, aliens, are they tied together? I'm not sure. But, maybe with all this disclosures coming out, I'm just kind of curious, why is the Navy the one coming out and talking, about UFOs and not the Air Force? Mike, are you back?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Oh,
got back.
Okay, hopefully you got yourself a nice cup of Java.
I did, yes, thank you.
Yeah, I got a bourbon here. That's not true. I lied. It's Scotch.
I'm drinking a delicious Montana microbrew.
Oh, yeah. Is that sweet or kind of
so
bitter?
It's not actually Java. It's kind of a hoppy IPA is what it is, but it is very good. When you said Java, I thought we had to pretend it was coffee, so I'm glad to hear you say that we got booze.
Hey, I'm only human, kind of.
Yeah, me too. Exactly.
So how's the book sales doing?
Oh, good. It's been a lot of fun talking about it and interacting with people and selling books. Yeah, and to be honest, it's funny that you mention it that way because I don't even really care about the sales. I haven't even looked at them since April, probably. To me, it's more about starting a conversation and having just discussing things that are relevant to this phenomena, but are that are rooted in something, that are grounded, that have a scientific basis, and that can help people understand possibly what they've experienced a little bit. Like I said, I don't have all the answers, but to be able to offer something up that makes sense to people, it's been really rewarding. So I really don't actually pay attention to sales. It's more about how many conversations I have each week, how many people reach out to me from different parts of the world, and how many people I get to talk to about it.
Oh, I get, I was telling one of my friends here, James, the other day, I get a couple hundred emails a day. Because, besides being on local radio stations across the country, I mean, people are listening in Australia, the United Kingdom, in Spain. I found out I was like one of the top downloaded paranormal shows from America in Spain, which was really shocking when I found that out.
Oh, that's awesome.
People are really into the paranormal now more than ever. And this alien thing, I've been dealing with it off and on since 1976. And, I disclosure, I think, the Navy stepping up and all of a sudden, admitting that, hey, pilots can go talk about it. The Pentagon saying that they're actually investigating and have been. It just is interesting because, the other day I was talking about a friend I had in the mid-'80s. You remember, I don't know how old you are, but there used to be an airline called Republic Airlines. They were a big airline at one time. Of course, they went bankrupt in the 80s. Yeah. I mean, they flew worldwide, Republic Airlines. If you ever get time, Google it. But anyway, he was one of the vice presidents of the airline. I got to know him. I don't even remember how I got to know him. And we became friends. And during Vietnam, he was a pilot. He was a colonel. He used to go over from, Japan or wherever, Guam or whatever it is, go over to, Vietnam, what he'd say, drop the eggs and then go back. And he said, on one of the missions, he was looking out his cockpit window and he saw a UFO off to his wing. And he said the dumbest thing is he told everybody on the B-52, hey, look, we're being followed by a UFO. So everybody on in the plane was looking at the UFO, and then all of a sudden, poof, it was gone. He said he made the biggest mistake in his military career, that he got onto the horn and radioed in that there was a UFO. It's been following him. And so when he landed, there was all these, Jeeps, pulling up next to the plane. And they were basically, with guns and all that stuff, making his flight crew get into, separating them all on these Jeeps and taking them back for interrogation. And he said it was really, really bad. And he was planning to stay in the military, but he was told after he reported that his military, he'll never be higher than a colonel. That was it. So, he got out of it. And he was telling me...
Yeah, I'm really glad they're changing that, though. I'm glad they're changing that for active military personnel. That's important because they're the ones that are going to see it the most. If they're up there in the skies and they're seeing these things, they're going to want to talk about it. So I'm glad that they're allowed to talk about it. And that's like you said, that's a huge change. That's a big sea change in this phenomenon. As if they're able to start talking about it, it kind of indicates that something came from higher up, where there's a process of disclosure happening, where there's some sort of divulgence of information that was never there before.
Yeah, and I find that interesting that the Navy is the one that stepped up. I would think, if anything, it would be the Air Force.
Air Force or the Department of Defense, yeah. Well, I mean, the Department of Defense has, too, to some extent, with the AA-tip thing and everything going on with that. They wouldn't let Luis Elizondo be doing what he's doing. There'd be people with guns outside his window every time he opened his mouth if he wasn't allowed to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Not to get all conspiracy theorist or anything, but it seems like what you just said, if there's been this long history of Jeeps pulling up and people in sunglasses and old-fashioned cars that were predated from their time, you'd think that there would be that same thing happening now. And if you don't see that, like nobody's talked to me. I've been talking about this for almost a year now, coming up on a year next month, and providing some pretty grounded scientific evidence for aspects of this phenomenon. And I haven't had anybody in dark glasses talking to me or trying to take me out from a sniper position through my window or anything like that. I think it's a different time that we live in now.
I think that if you would be talking what you're talking about now, or what I'm actually talking about, let's say in the late 80s, that's when you would have had a problem. I think something has happened ever since the Nimitz, encounter years ago. And all of a sudden, look how long it took before that video got released to the news media. Somebody released it to them, and it circulated really fast. Then I find it really strange that the Secretary of the Air Force to the graduating cadets, last year, told them the next war will not be a ground war. It'll be out in space. You could take that in so many different ways, but then 2 months later, Mike, we had our president making a joke. Well, I think we need to create a space force, which I already think we've had one for a long time.
I think Reagan started it.
Well, hey, I'm glad you mentioned Reagan. I'm going to tell you another little quick story. You can believe it or not. I don't care. That's your decision. My dad, back in the Korean War, while he's waiting to be discharged in Korea, met a guy. This guy, I don't know, you ever remember when you were young watching Rockford Files or the original Maverick TV show?
Yeah, I remember Maverick.
Okay. Well, that guy who played it was my dad's best friend. And,
no kidding.
Oh, yeah. And James would come up every summer. I didn't know who he was when I was a little kid. I just figured, hey, here's my dad's friend that came up from California to see my dad, and they would go out and hang around for a week, and then he would go back to California, or my dad would go to California to see him. And that went on since I was a little kid till I got, like 18 or 19. Well, at one point in my life, I was talking to James, and I said, I always been infatuated with Ronald Reagan. You know, when he was governor, how he went from a movie star to governor to become president. And at that time, Reagan was doing a show for young people. Once a month, he would get on, I think it was CBS. And I could be wrong, but I think it was CBS. And he had a talk show, radio talk show. People could call up and ask the president a question. Well, my dad's friend knew that I was infatuated with Reagan. He was great friends with Ronald Reagan. I get a phone call one day. Now, my dad said, hey, hang around the phone. You're going to be getting a phone call that day. I didn't know who it was. Well, somebody calls up on the phone and says they're from the White House. Well, hey, when you're like 17 or so, you know what you think? Hey, I'm getting a practical, joke here.
Yeah, a prank call.
Well,
yeah.
It happened to be Ronald Reagan. So
that's awesome.
I got to ask him a question or two, and that was the end of it. So I thought. A week later, I get a phone call from the White House, and here's Ronald Reagan, and we talked for like 15, 20, 30 minutes. I can't remember. It was a long time conversation. And then a week or two later, he called me again, and we were talking stuff. And at the time, he was really talking about Star Wars. And, and there was a lot of heated discussion about Russia. People were worried about, us getting nuked by Russia at that time. And I asked him a question, a blunt question. I said, hey, is Star Wars going to protect us against Russia? And he paused for a second. And he goes, no, it's going to protect us from them out there. Now, I didn't think nothing of that 2 years later. And I started wondering, what does from them out there mean?
Yeah. I don't know either.
I still don't know. I don't know.
I kind of want to go back in time and ask for clarification there, because that's pretty vague.
Yeah, it is. But I was even shocked he said that much to me. So I don't know what he meant.
It's cool that he called you back weeks after that to have further conversations. That's pretty cool for a sitting president.
Oh, yeah. He actually even invited me to come down to Washington, D.C. Like my parents could afford that. No. Yeah, I was obsessed. You have to understand. I loved radio so much. Like I said, when I was 12 years old, I had my amateur radio license. I already knew that when I got older, I was going to be a DJ and a talk show host because I have a big mouth. And, it just astounded me, that a president would take the time to talk to me, number one. But, you can take what he said in any way you want to take it. Some people could say, oh, he was telling you that, hey, the Star Wars was to protect us against aliens. I don't know. I have no idea. I didn't even think about asking him.
Yeah, I mean, at that age, it's hard to really conceptualize, and especially if you're talking to a sitting president, how it's got to make you a little nervous to even word for word what you would say.
Oh, yeah. See, that was one advantage when I got older. My dad's friend, he was friends with a lot of people. He was a real good friend of Merv Griffin. And actually, Merv Griffin, I talked to him for a couple hours, and he gave me a lot of advice about becoming a DJ. He said, don't do it. So, I don't know.
That's funny advice. That's really funny advice.
Yeah, well, I actually it was very good advice, because if you're a DJ, it's not like what type of job you have. You're a DJ or a talk show host. You never know from day to day if you have a job.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, the seas change, the tides change.
Oh, yeah, especially nowadays. To write this book, how long did it take you to get all the information and put it in book form?
It took 7 years of writing and rewriting and rewriting, and then editing. There's a lot of editing too to make it interesting to a broad variety of people. It's hard because as my peer reviewers noticed, I'm writing something that is very scientific for a scientific audience, but I also want it to be readable and understandable to anybody.